So, what is a crime? You'd think the answer is obvious, right? But as we're about to find out, trying to define what separates a crime from any other kind of wrongful act, well, that's one of the trickiest and most fascinating questions in all of law. We all have a gut feeling about what a crime is. I mean, theft, murder, assault, those things just feel fundamentally wrong, don't they? But the moment you try to move past that gut feeling and pin down a real definition, you stumble into a huge debate that's been going on for centuries. So let's peel back the layers a bit. We're going to dig in and try to figure out what truly makes a criminal act, well, criminal. All right, the most logical place to start is with a standard dictionary. Let's see if that simple, common sense definition actually holds up when we put it under the microscope. And there it is, straight from the Oxford English Dictionary. A crime is an unlawful activity. Seems pretty clean, right? Simple, makes sense? But this is actually where all the problems begin. You see, the entire definition hangs on this one single word, unlawful. And that word is both the heart of the definition and, believe it or not, its biggest flaw. Think about it for a second. If you ask, okay, what makes something unlawful? The most common answer is, well, because it's a crime. We've just talked ourselves into a complete circle. We're defining a crime as an unlawful act and an unlawful act as a crime. It tells us absolutely nothing. So if the dictionary is a dead end, where do we look now? Well, maybe the answer isn't in what the act is, but in who responds to it. Let's take a real-world example, like an assault. The exact same physical action, one person hitting another, can actually trigger two completely different legal pathways. It can be seen as a private issue between two people, or it can be treated as an offense against all of us, against society. And this is where the real difference becomes crystal clear. In civil law, it's the person who was wronged, the claimant, who sues to get compensation. But in criminal law, whoa, the state steps in. A prosecutor brings the case, and the goal isn't compensation for one person, it's punishment on behalf of everyone. This actually gives us a much more solid definition. A crime is an act that the state itself has decided to punish. Okay, so we've got a better handle on the what. A crime is whatever the state prosecutes, but that just kicks the can down the road, doesn't it? The real question is why. Why does the state decide to make certain things a crime and not others? Now we get to dive into the philosophy behind it all. And this leads us to our first huge idea. To make something a crime, does it absolutely have to cause some kind of harm to another person? Is that a requirement? This is a famous concept called the harm principle. It's a really powerful idea that basically says the government should only use the power of the law to stop you from hurting someone else. You know that old saying, your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins? That's the harm principle in a nutshell. But what if we look at it from a totally different angle? Does an act need to cause obvious physical harm? Or is it enough for it to just be, well, immoral? This brings us to a competing theory, legal moralism. This idea argues that a big part of the law's job is to protect society's shared moral code. So an act can be made a crime just because we, as a society, see it as deeply wrong, even if you can't point to a specific person who got hurt. But, this theory runs into problems pretty fast. Let's take cheating on a partner. I think most of us would agree that's an immoral thing to do. But should it be a crime? Should you go to jail for it? Almost everybody would say, no way. This shows us that even though our laws are definitely influenced by morality, they're not the same thing. So, all of this leads us to our final section, where we connect these big ideas to the role of the state in our everyday lives. What is the government really doing when it decides what is and isn't a crime? A key concept here is something called paternalism. It's the idea that the state sometimes acts like a parent. It limits our freedom for our own good. Think about seatbelt laws. You're forced to wear one, which limits your personal choice. But the idea is to protect you from getting hurt. Criminal law often plays that same protective, almost parental role. Now get this. This is a wild hypothetical from legal theory, but it shows you the raw power of the state. It says that if the government passes a law tomorrow that makes waving to your neighbor a crime, then, legally speaking, it is a crime. It's a shocking thought, but it makes the point perfectly. At its most basic level, a crime is whatever the state says it is. And that brings us full circle, right back to the beginning, but with a much, much deeper question. Is an act wrong just because the law says it is? Or does the law say it's a crime because it's already inherently wrong? That tension, between the power of the law and the nature of right and wrong, that is at the absolute heart of what a crime really is.